today's topic, that is the engagement standards in day-to-day practice. And though the standards on auditing and all other standards are issued under the authority of the AASB, which then brings it to the council, the reason why we are doing this and why Prakash ji spoke to me is that one, we want to make sure that the awareness of these standards increase. And secondly, a very keen point that he had in his mind was that a lot of our members are in day-to-day practice of banking. It may be raising finance. It may be in terms of other items such as, compliance, providing certain certificates, doing the bank branch audit, which 20,000 firms of our profession will be doing in the next 1.5 months whenever the lockdown gets lifted. And more importantly, so many other of our attestation functions, which are not for tax audit or income tax or GST purposes, are eventually used by banks and the BFSI industry. And what care should our chartered accountants take while making attestations relating to banking, not just bank branch audit, but small things such as net worth certificates or turnover certificate or other such questions that arise into day-to-day practice. So in today's session that we have planned for 1.5 hours, we will try to cover these engagement standards. What we will also try and cover, friends, is try and address some important questions which all of us have in our practice. I'll give you one or two simple examples, which I frequently get asked at various forums that I attend. Can chartered accountants attest projections of 5 years? That banks, while applying for loan, are seeking CMI data, जिसको हम बोलते हैं, certify those CMI data for next 5 years and certify a projection. Can we do that? Some banks say that September is too late for you to close your books. Please provide us unaudited books of accounts or unaudited balance sheet and P&L. Can chartered accountants provide unaudited balance sheet or P&L? Sometimes banks require a attested true copy of income tax return and computation. Are chartered accountants authorized to give these two copies? These are the larger questions that are asked in our day-to-day practice related to banking. And to touch upon these important aspects, under Prakash ji's leadership, we have organized this seminar, and I will definitely try, friends, to ensure that within this time that we have, I am able to leave all of you with certain knowledge of our standards, and more importantly, certain other standards. Because in day-to-day life, maybe some of us cleared when there were AAS or even the auditing standards were named differently. We do not end up reading the standards on auditing. It's a fact that I appreciate and understand that in normal chartered accountants, a lot of them do not find time to, though they are doing attestation and audit function, actually look at auditing standards. So therefore, today's session is not just focused on standards on auditing, but the overall umbrella of standards, which includes SQC1, जो पूरे firm के लिए है. So it is not restricted just for audit functions, but all your functions are effectively covered in the SQC umbrella. Other than that, there are assurance engagement standards. There are review standards, which talk about not an audit, but review. So audit और review के बीच में फर्क क्या है? That we'll try and understand. Other assurance engagements, and more importantly, related services, जिसे हम SRS बोलते हैं, related services पे जो standards हैं. So you are not giving an assurance, but what you are doing is giving a related service. एक certificate दे रहे हैं, और उसका क्या format होना चाहिए? And you will all be surprised, friends, that in the gambit of the standards that the AASB has issued and the council has approved, there are practically illustrations for all certificates that we are issuing in our day-to-day practice. Somewhere, what I feel the lack of knowledge or the lack of existence of the standards is there, because of which we are not able to follow this. तो आप अगर अपनी लाइफ में, हम सब ने कभी ना कभी एक नेटवर्थ का सर्टिफिकेट दिया होगा. But what we end up doing is, to whomsoever it may concern, on the basis of books and information and provided to us, we have certified that. आपने उसमें क्या certify किया? What did you look at? Is there a standard or institute का कोई governing framework है? When you give an audit report for a company, we all know we look at the SA 700, which is a standard Bible for all of us. We take the format from there, company name, year end we update, and we are issuing the audit report. But you will be surprised that for all these certificates, also there are relevant standards, which today's session I will try and take you through, friends. And why these become extremely critical and important is, Prakash ji would have shared with you that this year, for example, I am chairman of the FRRB. At FRRB level, we have decided that we are going to increase the coverage of companies that the FRRB selects for the purpose of review, where we verify compliance with accounting standards and auditing standards. That number of companies is going to double. Also, friends, very important for us to appreciate in this day is that the way other stakeholders, and most importantly, the government and other regulatory authorities look at our function as chartered accountants has changed tremendously. There is a lot of importance that is cast upon the auditor certificate. It may be in the form of a report, it may be in the form of a certificate that we give, or it may be a statement that we issue, but it carries a lot of weight and the government scrutinizes very highly. So it's our responsibility to make sure that we adopt these standards. And with these words, let me take you through the presentation that I've tried to prepare. And within these slides, we will try and cover all these standards. Is the PPT visible?
PPT is not visible. We can see you. We can see you very well, but other than nothing.
Okay, sir, I will switch to the PPT. If I'm not visible at that time, I think my audio shall continue and I will keep coming back on the video mode.
Okay.
I hope, Prakashji, you can listen to me and the PPT is visible to you.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, thank you. So this is the short presentation that I wanted to take you through. Before we understand engagement standards, friends, I think it is very critical for us to understand what is the authority attached to documents issued by the institute. The institute from time to time issues guidance notes as well as statements. In दोनों में फर्क क्या है? What is a guidance note? What is a statement? What are standards? So the statements, friends, are issued with the view to securing compliance and are critical for proper discharge of our functions as chartered accountants. Therefore, statements are mandatory, whereas guidance notes are designed to provide only guidance to members for certain issues, or therefore they are recommendatory in nature. What are the types of guidance notes? I think all of us at some point in our life would have looked at the guidance note on tax audit. We would have looked at the guidance note which is issued for other purposes. For example, the guidance note that comes for oil and gas if you have a specific industry. There are also guidance note which is most popular right now is the guidance note on bank branch audit, which also gets issued. So these are all recommendatory in nature. And recommendatory ka matlab ye nahi hai that we don't follow them. What recommendatory the institute says is that you must ideally follow what is given in the guidance note. But if looking at other standards, you feel that there can be another view or another treatment that is possible, you can, for the auditing matter, take that view, but subject to you must have the sufficient backup and the circumstances of the case must be necessary to do so. Or else, as a thumb rule, I think we must all appreciate statements are always mandatory, guidance notes are voluntary. Therefore, I think I will take you to the next slide, which a lot of us will have these books in our library, but we are not able to answer. Why are certain books in this pink color, certain are in dark green color, certain are issued in different colors? Is it that Prakash ji ko green pasand hai, mujhe pink pasand hai, kisi aur ko blue pasand hai? That is why we pick these colors, or there is a significance to these colors? Friends, I think most places that I go, people are not aware, but it's critical for us to understand that the book that you see, for example, in the center, which is slightly pinkish red in color, those are standards which are issued. These may be issued by different boards of the institute. The example here is the Compendium of Internal Audit Standards. Those are recommended right now, but those are standards and therefore come in this color. Similarly, the auditing standards and the accounting standards are in this color. The guidance note bear a dark green color, which you can see we have put the guidance note on the audit of banks 2020. So all of these documents, friends, have a very clear color pattern, and which is what the institute uses. So I thought it was important for us to appreciate and understand what these colors mean. क्योंकि हम काफी बार book ले लेते हैं, we put it in our library, but we are not able to make out what purpose is that solving. So before we understand कौन से auditing standards apply करने हैं, at least understand what are statements and guidance notes, what is the difference, and why each publication has a different distinct color to it. So friends, when we are talking about auditing and assurance, what is assurance? This definition is important because when we go to application of standard, हमें स्टैंडर्ड ऑन ऑडिटिंग लेना है, रिव्यू स्टैंडर्ड लेना है, अश्योरेंस एंगेजमेंट लेना है, या SRS विच इज रिलेटेड सर्विसेज लेनी है, will depend on whether the engagement is an assurance engagement. What is an assurance engagement? Assurance engagement means where an engagement where a practitioner would mean a practicing chartered accountant. We, as you all are aware, our standards are based on the international standards. The IAASB issues the ISAs, which are now in India in the form of essays. We have made modifications to suit them to Indian requirement. But the engagement, so the word they used is practitioner, because some places there is CPA, there is chartered accountant, but generally we refer to them as practitioners. So a practitioner is expressing a conclusion designed to enhance the degree of confidence of the intended user other than the responsible party. इसका मतलब क्या हुआ, मैं अगर एक सर्टिफिकेट दे रहा हूं, वो क्लाइंट के लिए इंपॉर्टेंट है if it is only intended for the client and nobody else, not the shareholder, not the government, nobody else is going to use it, then it is not assurance. But if somebody else is going to, besides the client, rely on that certificate, it becomes an assurance engagement. Very important for us to understand when we look at the other services. So this is the definition of assurance. तो क्या assurance में cover नहीं होता है? Engagements which are covered by SRS, जो मैंने आपको बताया, related services. So there are certificates that you give to the management which is only for their perusal. For example, agreed upon procedures. We will talk about this standard when we go to this SRSs, but agreed upon procedures, as the name suggests, means management has agreed with you certain procedures that as an auditor you are to perform, and if you perform them and the report is to the management, तो इसको assurance नहीं कहा जाता है, therefore it is out of the assurance framework. Then, for example, preparation of tax returns and consulting or advisory services. Here, you are not giving any service additional, and therefore these do not constitute a assurance because no third party is relying on it. An important question that a lot of people ask me is in regards to the code of ethics, and where they ask is whether as a chartered accountant I am the auditor of a private limited company and I can file the income tax return or not. This is a more of a code of ethics question, but it is important for us to understand that the revised code of ethics 2019 is going to be made applicable from 1st of July 2020. In that revised code of ethics, there is a very clear-cut definition of administrative services. And what is the institute or the ethical standards board saying is that एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सर्विसेज को डिफाइन किया गया है, टैक्स रिटर्न सर्विसेज को भी, कि हम सिर्फ डेटा लेते हैं एंड वी आर ओनली फाइलिंग इट. देयर इज नो ऑडिट और एनी अदर टूल दैट वी आर डूइंग ऑन दैट डॉक्यूमेंट्स, एंड देयरफॉर इट डज नॉट कॉन्स्टिट्यूट अश्योरेंस. सो देयरफॉर इट इज नॉट अश्योरेंस. एंड ऑल्सो फॉर कोड ऑफ एथिक्स पर्पस, अगर आप किसी कंपनी का ऑडिट कर रहे हैं और उसका रिटर्न भी फाइल कर रहे हैं, एज ऑफ टुडे बेस्ड ऑन आवर कोड ऑफ एथिक्स इट इज नॉट अ वायलेशन. Also, the section 144 of the Companies Act, which talks about what functions an auditor cannot perform, for example, bookkeeping, valuation, the 7 different items which are mentioned there. As of today, tax return services are not barred. Again, at the bottom of that section 144 is the opportunity for the government to notify any other services that they feel, in their opinion, are in conflict. So if tomorrow government notifies tax return services, then yes, the position will change. But as of today, it is very clear that if you are providing tax return services for your audit clients, it is not in violation of either the Code of Ethics or the Companies Act. So therefore, these are engagements which are not assurance, and we will not be covering them in today's presentation. So what will we be covering? This is a very important chart, friends, which I would like to draw your attention to on the left. सबसे ऊपर आता है the Chartered Accountants Act 1949. You would have all heard in various speeches that our institute got created through the Chartered Accountants Act 1949. It is before the passing of the constitution of the country that the institute was established. It's a matter of great pride for us. But what that act also is the governing principle for us. So the act, under it is prescribed the code of ethics and the pronouncements which are issued by the council. All these three put together are the code, as we commonly refer to it. So this is the centerpiece. Just below that is the SQC, the Standard on Quality Control. What is the SQC, friends? The way I like to explain SQC is an overarching umbrella. It is on top. आप ऑडिट सर्विस दे रहे हैं या नॉन ऑडिट सर्विस दे रहे हैं. You are giving assurance or non-assurance services. SQCs are what sits at the firm level and at the top. So therefore, very important at looking at the chart for us to understand that at the top of this is the SQCs. Now we will have to divide the nature of our work between assurance service and related service. So what is assurance service? Like I mentioned to you, if third party is going to rely on it, it becomes an assurance service. But अगर आप सिर्फ client के purpose के लिए कोई certificate दे रहे हैं, it is only to be intended to be used by the management, by the client, then it is an SRS. So if you look at the right bottom of the chart, it says standards on related services. So those are standards in which no third party will rely. Those are related services and therefore do not form part of assurance. That is why मैंने assurance का definition पहले समझाया. Related services are non-assurance. The agreed upon procedures is an example of that. We will reach individual standards when we get there. So now related services we have understood. Assurance services we have understood. Now you need to understand whether that assurance service, जो आप assurance दे रहे हैं, it relates to historical information. So if I am giving, for example, a report for 1920, or if it's a special audit, I may be giving for 7 past years. All of those are historical financial information. History, yani आज से पहले का. So for historical financial information, if you are going and providing the highest level of assurance, which is an audit, then it is SAs. SA किसमें applicable होते हैं? आप जब companies audit करते हो, in under the Companies Act, हम जो tax audit करते हैं under the Income Tax Act, which are all on historical, and there is an audit report attached to it, you are supposed to follow the standards on auditing. But if you are not doing an audit, but a review क्या होता है वो अपने आगे समझेंगे, but for common understanding, limited review, some of the persons here in this attendance would have been doing limited reviews for SAB, filing it to BSc and NSC. Those are reviews, which is a level below assurance of audit, and वो standards SRE से govern होते हैं. So in historical financial information, there are two types of standards, standard on audit and standard on review engagement. And if it is not for historical information, जैसा मैंने आपको बताया future projections के लिए है, or it is for the future, then it is SAE. So I hope with this we are able to in a clear pattern understand. At top is the SQC. SQC is the overarching umbrella under which all standards fall. अगर service assurance नहीं है, that is it is only meant for management, not for third party, it is SRS. Then if it is an audit, annual audit, we follow SAs. If it is a review, we follow SRE. Quarterly review जैसा हो गया या other review जिसमें audit नहीं है, review है SRE. And if it is not for historical information, that is it is probably used by third party but relates to the future, then we have SAEs. And therefore these four components, and on top the fifth is the SQC. So I think with this we have understood the overall umbrella of standards, how they fall, how they are covered. So I have just listed them out here for us to better understand them. SQC on top, audits, अगर company audit, tax audit तो SAs, अगर limited review कर रहे हैं तो SRE. If it is not for historical information and it is still an assurance, yani third party is going to use SAE, but third party is not going to use, then SRS. That is how our standards are broken up into. Very commonly used three terms: attestation, assurance, audit. हम तीनों को एक दूसरे के लिए यूज कर लेते हैं, but each three have a different purpose, which I have tried to show you in this slide. So now friends, let's try and understand the difference between audit and review. And for that, I would like to all of you to view the pyramid on the top right of your screen, where audit is listed at the top, which means that audit is the highest level of assurance. Below that comes review. Below them are compilations, and at the bottom are financial statement preparations. So highest independence or complexity audit में लगती है, simplest is financial statements preparation. Thankfully in India, if you look at it friends, most chartered accountants do not engage in financial statement preparation. हमारे वहाँ मेहता जी होते हैं, और we have accountants who do this task for us. Therefore CAs are not doing it, but world over you will be surprised, lot of CPAs and CAs actually do financial statement preparation work also. So therefore I've put the entire pyramid there for us to understand. Audit or review में difference क्या है? Audit, friends, is always meant to provide reasonable assurance. It is a high degree of assurance, but the assurance is always reasonable. It is never absolute. हम कभी ऐसा नहीं लिखते कि हमने सब कुछ देख लिया है. We mentioned we have verified best of our information. You've used standards. You've looked at samples. So therefore, it is a high level, but not absolute. Therefore, a reasonable assurance. Review, friends, limited assurance देता है. And the biggest test of this is the language in which the reports are drafted. The audit report will always say, in our opinion. If it's a proprietor, you may say, in my opinion. But for generally partnership firms, we say, in our opinion is the opinion paragraph. Whereas in a review, generally the word that comes is, nothing has come to our attention. So in review, you are not going to verify in detail. You are only looking for exceptions. And I like to call review as exceptions reporting. There's a famous phrase that was recently used by one of the senior government functionaries. He said that as chartered accountants, you are not expected to find a needle in a haystack as an auditor. But if there is an elephant in the room, you ought to have reported that. So we have to understand, अगर छोटी चीजें miss हो गई, audit है या review है, generally it is not supposed to be found because we are doing it on a sample and test check basis. But if there is a huge inconsistency, that should be caught in audit as well as in review, because review says nothing has come to our attention. So these are certain fundamental differences that exist between an audit and a review. I hope so far I've been able to very clearly demonstrate to you the difference between assurance and non-assurance, and now between audit and review. Because of this, we will be able to correctly target and select which standards are for us to apply. I will now take you through, friends, the SQC1, which I mentioned is the overarching umbrella, which applies to all. So if you read the name on top, it says quality controls for firms that perform audits and reviews of historical financial information, other assurance and related services. So any type of work that we are doing, audit है, review है, assurance है या related है, all four के ऊपर SQC लगता है. And this is just a screenshot of what the SQC comprises of. I have not gone into great detail because I would want to finish this in the allotted time that has been granted to me. But an important point that I want to share with all of you is that every single standard, uska detailed video, along with the contents, has been uploaded on the Digital Learning Hub. Each of them is a separate module. And if you go through each one of them, you are getting structured CPRs. Usme video content hai. Plus, there is a presentation of ebook. You can study these in detail. In today's seminar, we'll only go through the overview of these standards. So the SQC1, friends, like I say, it applies to all firms. Those of you who've got your peer review done will always notice कि इसकी काफी सारी चीजें जो SQC1 में लिखी गई हैं, वो peer review के time पे check की जाती हैं. What are the important definitions that SQC1 covers? So SQC1 has the concept of engagement partner. Every assignment that we do, जिसे हम assignment कहते हैं, is referred to as an engagement if it relates to assurance services or non-assurance also. And therefore, engagement partner is a person who will be responsible for that engagement. He has to be designated. The definition is given here. Also, there must be an engagement quality control review. So every assignment that gets done, the standards require that you must have a quality control review partner who looks at them. The engagement team is the team which conducts the audit or the review service. It comprises of the partner, the paid staff, the chartered accountants, and the articles who are all working on the assignment. Usko hum engagement team कहते हैं. Firm. So SQC for firms hai. So a lot of people say we are proprietors and therefore not applicable. Well, friends, that is not the case. Firms mean proprietors as well as partnership firms, and they are all covered within SQC1. So the SQC1 is mandatory for all of us in holding COP, either as a proprietor or as a partnership firm. Similarly, other important definitions are covered in this SQC1. What the SQC1 overall talks about, friends, is the leadership responsibility of quality within a firm. यानी कि क्वालिटी जो एंगेजमेंट्स जा रहे हैं उसकी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी फर्म में लीडरशिप की क्या है, एंड द एथिकल रिक्वायरमेंट्स. एज वी आर ऑल अवेयर, अंडर द कंपनीज एक्ट, फॉर एग्जांपल, यू कैन नॉट होल्ड शेयर्स ऑफ द कंपनी दैट यू आर गोइंग टू ऑडिट. बट व्हाट अबाउट द अदर्स, ट्रस्ट्स, other entities in which you are there? So that is governed by the SQC1, which talks about the independence and why you must be independent of the entity. So that is covered here. It also talks about the acceptance and continuous of client relationship, like we mentioned, the engagement team. And very important, it also talks about monitoring, that the quality control is not supposed to be just an exercise which we do once and for an engagement. The quality control exercise, friends, is supposed to run throughout the year. And the SQC1 applies for us throughout the year. It has to be a continuously monitored exercise. So SQC1, friends, I hope with this we are trying to clear ourselves. It is the umbrella, the arc under which all these standards will sit. Now I would like to take you through the standards on auditing. One important part that I would like to also discuss here is the para 83 of SQC1. A lot of people ask that how much time should I retain my audit files? And the answer is given in the SQC1, which says that the retention period ordinarily is no shorter than 7 years from the date of the auditor's report. What does it mean, friends? For example, March 2013's audit was completed by you on 15th of April, for example. Then today, those audit files are no longer supposed to be retained by you. But for example, the March 13th audit was done by you in August or September. Then till August or September, you are supposed to minimum maintain these 7 years audit file. And therefore, this retention is covered. Seniors will recollect earlier this period used to be 10 years. After we have adopted the IAASB's Clarity project and these standards are now aligned internationally, the period of retention now stands at 7 years. So friends, now we come on to the standards on auditing, the SA. The SAs, friends, are issued under the Clarity project. And what they do is that they provide for a very clear numbering and the sections are very clearly laid out. Why this is important is that tomorrow, if there is a new standard, and I'm only talking hypothetically, but all of you would have seen that there was a great global webinar that the Institute organized only a week ago, where almost 80,000 people attended, and we had leaders from across the audit and accounting industry address us. Some people even raised the concerns that there must be sufficient audit standard to cover scenarios like pandemics. And for example, tomorrow, it is not going to happen immediately, but let's say in a few months or a year from now, the IAASB decides to come out with a standard on pandemics and how you deal with it. And we want to insert it within this framework. Because of the numbering, you are able to do it. They are all have a very clear guidance and a numbering followed. So income tax may 44, 44A, AB, AD, AE, AF, you have to do, because if you want to amend, you need to create a new subsection. Here, the way they are numbered, you are easily able to insert them in the middle. So friends, the 100 to 199 talk about the introductory matters. The 200 to 299, these standards, friends, are the general principles and responsibilities. So this covers the entire, I would like to use the word life cycle of the audit in a way, because it covers from the start to almost the completion of the audit. And certain important standards that I would like to touch upon today, which is extremely important for us in our day-to-day practice. The SA 200, like I said, talks about the overall independence of the auditor. 0 is the terms of audit engagement. What does SA 210 talk about? हम सब ने कभी ना कभी engagement letter term सुना होगा. Somewhere we may not be practically following it. We are taking an appointment letter and never sometimes issuing a letter in return to the client. Friends, it is highly advisable. Rather, the standard requires you to do it. And that engagement letters terms are supposed to be as per SA 210. The SA 210 talks about agreeing the terms of audit engagement. There is excellent guidance which this standard gives us in terms of what must be the contents of the audit engagement letter. इसमें हमें क्या लिखना है? What is the responsibility of the management? What is the responsibility of the auditor? What are the fees that you will charge for this assignment? And also, very importantly, we must all appreciate that confidentiality is the bedrock of audit services. And therefore, the client will always expect whatever information is given to you will remain confidential with you as an auditor. But there will be times, friends, for example, your firm gets into a peer review and you will share that audit file with the peer reviewer. In that case, are we breaching confidentiality? And therefore, it is critical that in SA 210, when you are issuing an engagement letter, we must have a paragraph to clearly state that if our engagement is selected for peer review, we will make these documents available to the peer reviewer, and it will not be a violation of the confidentiality clause. Similarly, now the code of ethics that stands amended and applicable from 1st of July, you will have to communicate with the previous auditor, and the previous auditor may end up sharing certain documents. Those also will be exempt. The code of ethics has been amended, but I would like to draw your attention to that fact here also. SA 230, again, very important, talks about the documentation standards, how you must document your findings and your audit evidence. So SA 230 talks about the entire documentation, how it has to be maintained. The 240 talks about auditors' responsibility relating to fraud. Again, the fundamental principle here is what we have learned from the beginning, the auditor's role as a watchdog and not as a greyhound, and what you are supposed to do in case you go fraud. The expectation is not for you to go looking for a fraud, but yes, if during the course of audit a fraud is to be found, what is the responsibility of the auditor? You have to communicate it to those charged with governance and management. You will have to communicate with them. Even the Companies Act now, friends, mandates that if you have a fraud above 1 crore, they will have to separately report it to the government. Am I audible, Prakash ji?
Yes. बिल्कुल है सर.
Yeah, there was some audio in the middle, so I just wanted to confirm, sir. Okay. So, yeah, again, I will come to SA 240 relating to fraud. Now, very important for us to understand SA 250. शायद काफी लोगों ने हमने अभी तक इस पे अच्छे से ध्यान नहीं दिया होगा when we are conducting our audit, but it talks about consideration of laws and regulation in an audit of financial statement. What am I talking about in the SA 250? Friends, I'll give you a small example. You are doing the audit of a company, and you are knowing that it has permanent 30 or 25 employees. You know it is crossing 20, and we all are aware that the limit for PF registration is 20 employees. But हम उसका tax audit कर रहे थे. You were restricting yourself to only 1 to 40 clause and probably not reporting on other aspects. The SA 250 talks about compliance of other laws and regulation. Also very important to mention at this juncture, friends, it will have to also be seen in context to the NOCLAR, NOCLAR, non-compliance of other acts and regulations. Very similar language used between NOCLAR and SA 250. And what both of them talk about is that during the course of audit, अगर आपको कोई non-compliance other act or regulation से मिलता है, which has a financial implication, and the financial implication is material. So if both of them are found, then in those cases, you are supposed to report them. NOCLAR this year is going to be only for listed companies, but the SA 250 also has provisions for non-compliance that has to be verified and attested by the auditor. So important for us to understand SA 250, and after 1st July, if we are doing listed companies, it will become extremely more critical because NOCLAR is putting added weight on this requirement of ours. So I will now get back to the SA 250 and 260. The 299, friends, talks about joint audit of financial statements. The firms here who are present, who maybe probably have done the work of central statutory auditors or certain larger companies of the country which are governed by CNAG or even private where joint auditors are appointed. I think this is very commonly known to them. The responsibilities, the roles and responsibilities of joint auditors is set out. This is done, friends, through the SA 299. Prakash ji, I'm sure, would have been using the SA 299 within the firm because he has been joint auditor of a lot of large corporations, and all of us at some point may have been appointed as joint auditor. That responsibility is laid out in the SA 299. Now, friends,
yes, it is very important. It is very important.
Yes, sir. So the SA 300 to 499 series talks about risk assessment and response to assessed risk. Friends, the audit approach that we used to do earlier, कि तूने routine entries देख ली, journal देख लिया, GL देख लिया, that was the old approach. The approach that the standards now mandate us to do is first do a risk assessment. As soon as you have the engagement, we are supposed to first plan the audit and assess the risk. Engagement में risk कितना है? Because only if you are able to bring the assessed list to an acceptable level, can you issue an opinion. So risk has to be understood in that perspective, and with you understand that risk, these standards have been laid out. The SA 300, for example, talks about the planning of audit, the entire planning file, how work has to be distributed, how we will go about selecting the samples for the audit is in 300. The procedure of sampling again is given a specific standard. The SA 315, friends, talks about identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement. This is what we commonly in our day-to-day life refer to as, friends, materiality. And what is materiality is to be judged based on the client's, individual client. Generally, what happens, friends, is that there is a template that we use. We may use the percentage of turnover, percentage of total assets, or as a percentage of PAT. Work that out and come out with a materiality or a planning materiality number. So that, friends, is given in SA 315. I'm happy to share, friends, that in the last council year that concluded this February 11th, the council had approved an allocation of 30 crores to develop a world-class tool for all our small and medium practitioners. It is very clear and important for us to understand, and even I believe the council and a lot of the council members also appreciate that for larger firms or the multinational firms to develop their own audit tool is easy and it is probably available to them. But small and medium practitioners like you and me may not have the best tools available for us to document, for us to demonstrate our quality of audit, and more importantly, follow these steps in a checklist format. So उसे checklist को develop करने के लिए, how do we store this? How can templates of engagement letter, how can templates of materiality and other items be provided to our auditors as a guidance be done? This project was undertaken last year. A lot of council members are involved in doing this activity and task, and I'm hopeful that sometime this year we can come out with a tool which can be useful for all our practitioners to implement the requirements of auditing standards, accounting standards at a single platform. आप सबने फ्रेंड्स यूडिन को इतने अच्छे से एक्सेप्ट किया है. वी नाउ हैव ओवर 1 crore यूडिन्स and we are all now adapt to using technology, and that has given us a huge amount of confidence within the council that when UDIN could be such a successful measure, if we come out with a better reform agenda which is actually aiding the members, it is going to be accepted and appreciated widely. This project is currently just in the beginning phase, and we will be probably doing a global tender, as I am given to understand. But why these standards are important, friends, and I cannot emphasize this enough. आज की तारीख में, if you go to ICAI.org and you go under the disciplinary mechanism, the orders of the past 3 or 4 years are already there. And for academic purposes, and again, this is my guess, I have not written any of those orders, but my understanding of the entire disciplinary proceeding in this year and a half is, if you go to any of these orders where the chartered accountant has been held not guilty, you will be able to see that the chartered accountant was able to demonstrate to the disciplinary committee that the audit I have performed has been done keeping these auditing standards in the framework in mind. So therefore, I always say this and stress upon this fact that audit standards are not a burden. ये बोझ नहीं है. This is actually a protection, a suraksha kavach, if I can use the word, for all of us doing attestation functions. Because if you follow these standards and your reports are within these guidelines, then you can very well defend your case saying, I am not grossly negligent in doing my duties and I have followed all the standards that the institute has prescribed. So friends, I'll now go back again to the 315 and the 320, which talk about the material, the risk and the materiality. Very important for us to understand. The 330 and 402 I'll not cover, not very applicable, but I wanted to give you a heads up about the materiality and the concept of risk that is embedded in these audit standards. Now, friends, we come to 500 to 599. In my view, this is the meat or the main part of the standards. This covers आपको audit कैसे करना है, or more important than that, audit करने के बाद how do you make sure that it's documented correctly और उसका procedure क्या है. And here we will start with SA 500. I hope you can all view me here, because SA 500 I would like to take 5 minutes to discuss with you, because in today's day it is extremely critical for us to understand what audit evidence is. And a lot of people have asked me this question. Some of you may have this query in your mind, and therefore I am trying to touch it upon here. The audit evidence, as we understand, is what the auditor collects to make sure that the assessed risk can be brought to an acceptable level. Audit evidence क्या होता है? The accounting records that is defined in the standard, for example. Now the multi-million dollar question is, can electronic evidence be considered as audit evidence? If you look at it, friends, on the 22nd of March, the institute very proactively came out, and I would like to thank the AASB for this, and came out with a guidance to our members which said that you are now allowed to sign your certificates and report using your digital signature. If you look at the notification, we have referred to not just the Information Technology Act of 2000, the section 3 and 4 of the act, but also the Indian Evidence Act. And we have stated that based on this Indian Evidence Act, how electronic signatures and electronic evidence can also be accepted in the court of law. So जब हम ऑडिट एविडेंस समझ रहे हैं, हमें एविडेंस एक्ट को और हमारे स्टैंडर्ड्स को कोरिलेट करके आईटी एक्ट के हिसाब से समझना जरूरी है. Or why this is important is tomorrow we may be entering a bank branch audit phase. Prakash Sharma ji is the vice chairman of PDC and they are working aggressively with the RBI and others to make sure that the audit, there is no dilution in the quality of audit. But what will be important for all of us is that we will have to do our bank branch audit. Either if the banks permit, I don't think that is going to be possible remotely from our home. But for example, if the bank branch is in a red zone, we may end up going to a bank branch in a green zone and they will make documents available to us in that green zone. In such a situation, when you are made available documents in electronic form, what must you do? And therefore, this standard and our understanding of the Evidence Act and IT Act is essential, because if these documents are coming over, my recommendation to you is, see, audit में काफी बार हम बैंक की security देखते हैं अगर बैंक branch audit में जाते हैं. We only note it, we never get it back. So if that is made available and you are assured that this is the original copy lying with the bank, I mean, we will do our audit procedures. But certain documents, we take it for our file. If those documents can bear a signature or are coming from the official email ID, for example, and you are able to prove with a timestamp that this came from the bank manager or the client, then such audit evidence can surely be used. You will be seeing that a lot of large firms are now keeping the entire audit file in an electronic format. The reason they are able to do and document the audit engagement and all the procedures electronically is because of this standard in conjunction with the IT Act and the Evidence Act. So therefore, I thought it was very important for me to touch upon the SA 500, the audit evidence, and the SA 501, which talks about specific consideration for some selected items mentioned there. Now we come to SA 505. Again, a very important standard, external confirmation. The audit, friends, can be done either through inquiry, through observation, through reperformance, or through an external confirmation. Inquiry यानी मैंने क्लाइंट को पूछा और उसको डॉक्यूमेंट किया. Of course, that cannot be sacrosanct. Second is observation. You observed a process. For example, inventory stock taking, management was taking, you were part of it. That is observation. Third is reperformance. For example, the bank reconciliation statement. The management had prepared, you independently got the bank statement, the bank book, and created the whole bank reconciliation yourself. That is reperformance. That has higher value than inquiry and observation. But the most important form of audit evidence, rather the most reliable form of audit evidence, is external confirmation. And in today's scenario, again, when we are faced with the challenge of COVID, how do we get this external confirmations is going to be a challenge. There are certain portals which are providing confirmations online for bank balances, in my view. And again, I'm not subscribing to or promoting anything. I'm only sharing the technology available so that we are aware of this. There are portals which give us bank balance confirmations online. We can also seek this, like I said, electronically from the banks and others. Because in this COVID scenario, all other audit evidences, for example, debtors and creditors, शायद हम ना ले पाए, but the bank confirmation is very critical. We all remember the Satyam episode and what happened in that episode. Why they did not.
एक सेकंड अनिकेत, एक मिनट अनिकेत सर, किसी ने अपना जो सिस्टम है वो म्यूट नहीं कर रखा है. प्लीज सबको रिक्वेस्ट है, सब जो बोल नहीं रहे हैं वो म्यूट कर लीजिए, आपकी वो वॉइस डिस्टर्ब कर रही है. प्लीज कैरी ऑन सर, कैरी ऑन अनिकेत.
Thank you, Chairman sir. So, like I mentioned, we all remember the Satyam saga, where the bank confirmation apparently was not availed by the auditor, and because of which there was huge penalty clauses that were followed. And after that, I think it is made mandatory by all of us that we are ensuring that these external confirmations are sought. Post में कोरोना के सिचुएशन में शायद हम by post or physical form ये confirmations ना ला पाए, and therefore it will become important that electronically we use whatever technologies are available to ensure that these confirmations are obtained electronically. So 500 and 505 will be very critical, especially in the COVID scenario. The 510 talks about the opening balances. I think it is the starting of all our audits. हम जब शुरू करते हैं audit, opening balance testing करते हैं. That is what the standard prescribes. The SA 520. talks about analytical procedures. And again, in smaller and medium firms, somewhere we are able to analytically look at numbers. हम previous year और current year को compare हमारे mind में तो करते हैं, but we don't document that process of analytical procedures. The SA 520 talks about how you can analyze them, how year-on-year comparison can be made. Simple example I can give you, friends, is if you are doing audit of a manufacturing concern and you see that the consumption of units of power has increased by 30%, naturally it must come to your mind that the production would ideally have gone up 30%. So you will expect a similar increase in sales. You will expect a similar increase in COGS because consumption क्यों बढ़ा होगा? Because the production would have been higher. So these are analytical procedures which allow you to correlate different items of the balance sheet and P&L and are able to substantiate your audit procedures. 530 talks about the audit sampling. We all are aware that statistical, non-statistical sampling can be done. This provides the audit sampling standard provides us with the procedures that are to be taken. Again, right now in the market, a lot of softwares are available which essentially help auditors in picking the samples. This is extremely useful for us to prove that we did not have a bias in selection of the sample and that it was independently selected by a software. So that is what 530 talks about. 540, 550 are, the estimates and related parties, again important. 560 I would like to touch upon is subsequent events. And what are subsequent events? For example, the year ended March 31, 2020. For the audit of March 2020, we will do in August and September. What this standard basically prescribes is that transactions after 1st of April 2020 and up to the date of your signing of the report, you must also verify and look कि इसमें से कोई expense ऐसा है which relates to your year of under audit and it can impact your judgment or your audit report. I'll give you a simple example. In May, there is a huge legal fees of 1 crore, 50 lakhs or 25 lakhs, depending on the client size, that is paid. It must immediately raise a question in our mind. Though we are not looking at the ledgers of 2021, for subsequent events, you must look at the bank disbursements. That is where you can pick up कि हाँ बड़ा legal cost आया था, and you must ask the client what it relates to. And if they say yes, there was a legal suit going on with us, then that is probably a contingent liability that will sit on the balance sheet as of 31st March 20. This is how we pick up the contingent liabilities and other liabilities based on subsequent event testing. So that standard prescribes how you must do it, and it is very critical and important for us to follow. Then I would like to touch upon the going concern. Again, this is going to be the biggest fight this year under Corona. A lot of auditors may want to have a qualification on going concern because we do not know as on the signing date whether the entity will be able to perform as a going concern. Some entities have huge debt covenants which are embedded in their loan agreements, whether they will be able to fulfill those loans. And if they are not able to fulfill and they are taken to NCLT, for example, for liquidation or for resolution, is that entity, जब आप sign कर रहे हो, क्या आप going concern दे सकते हो? That has to be tested as per the revised SA 570. And the final important standard in this frame is the 580, which talks about the written representation. What is that? जिसे हम common भाषा में certificate कहते हैं कि मैंने client से certificate ले लिया भैया इस चीज का. So that is in audit terms referred to as the written representation. Again, the formats are available. I believe Institute has also at some point given formats of engagement letter and written representations. This is subject to our own audit. उसकी जो typicalities है उसके हिसाब से हमें लेना है. But certain aspects that we have relied on the management while making our assessment, those must be taken in written form, and how they must be taken is prescribed in SA 580 as written representations. SA 600 to 699, very quickly, the 600, yes, there is a departure from the international standard auditing, majorly because, and my compliments to the AASB at that time for making this departure, and more importantly, the council also, because what it talks about are the use of work of another auditor and group auditors. अगर international standard follow करते, so if your company has a subsidiary in the foreign country, we would probably have been mandated to have the same auditor, and the work would probably have shifted to larger multinational firms. But the way SA 600 right now in India is, it relies on a very different mechanism, very widely used by central statutory auditors. So आप जब branch audit करते हैं, the central auditor relies on your work, and that reliance is through the SA 600. Other important standard is 610 internal audit. How do you leverage the internal auditor's work on assessment? And the 620, which talks about using the work of an auditor's expert. The expert can be architect, can be engineer, can be any other different professional based on the industry. One common expert that we all end up using, for example, is the actuary. When we follow AS 15, that is employee benefits, and make provision for gratuity and leave encashment, we are following the actuary's calculations, and therefore we are relying on SA 620 to rely on the work of an auditor's expert. Now, SA 700 to 799, I don't think I need to take it in much detail, because SA 700 to 799 friends talk about the audit report format. The illustration in SA 500, there are 5 illustrations that are given which cover all scenarios. Listed company hai, holding company hai, consolidated accounts hai. All of them have been explained in these standards in this series. If you look at the entire series of the standards, it starts with an unqualified opinion, yani aapko kuch nahi mila. Then there are qualified opinions, which means you have a qualification, and therefore basis of qualification must be given in the audit report. There is adverse opinion, there is disclaimer of opinion, which are all covered under this standard. And also the EOM, that is emphasis of matter, is covered under the standard. One important change that was brought in last year, and somehow last year some companies have missed it. Again, whenever they come for scrutiny and review, we will assess it. But the KAM, the CAM, the Key Audit Matters, which was introduced last year, will also be applicable for March 20 audits. I request all of you who have not followed it in case of listed companies, please look at the standard. The CAM are to be given. Some international guidance is now also available in what the CAMs should be. So key audit matters are matters which you, in your opinion, are not a EOM or a qualification, but were important for you to make your judgment as an auditor and arrive at your conclusions. Those have to be listed in CAM. और वो CAM में हमें बताने हैं. So this again series, I would just take you through 700 to 720 जो हमने दिखाई है यहाँ. They talk about the unqualified opinion, the modification in opinion, that is qualified opinion, adverse opinion, disclaimer of opinion, the EOM paragraph. The 710 very importantly talks about comparative information. हमें comparative figures देने हैं. You cannot give only current year's figures. You are supposed to, as per asset 710, give comparative information. That is current year figures and prior year figures. And finally, friends, SA 800 to 899 talk about certain special considerations, not very important in our life. So with this, I have completed the standards on auditing. Again, as a recap, these are applying to annual audits, which we do, for example, for Companies Act or other annual audits under other acts, cooperative या other acts में अगर हम annual audit यानी historical information का audit करते हैं, then standards. Now, if you do not do an audit, but if you do a review, so like I mentioned earlier, the audit gives reasonable assurance, review only gives a limited assurance. If you are doing the review for the full year, you are supposed to follow SRE 2400. If you are doing review for a quarter या interim period, आप देखते हैं हम BSc NSE को 6 monthly quarterly report submit करते हैं. Those reviews are done under the SRE 2410. So as of today, we have only 2 review standards, 2400, 2410. If you want to understand them in detail, like I mentioned, on the Digital Learning Hub, we have put up a lot of content. But audit के लिए SA और review के लिए SRE. So with this, historical financials have been completed by me. मार्च 20 के पहले का अगर आप ऑडिट रिपोर्ट दे रहे हैं या रिव्यू रिपोर्ट दे रहे हैं 4th क्वार्टर का, then SA or SRE depending on that. What is now to be covered, friends, are the assurance engagements other than historical financial information. यानी जिसमें हम historical financial information की बात नहीं करते. In those, we have these 3 SAEs. What are this? This is still something where you are reporting to the third party. Therefore, it is an assurance engagement. अकेला client आप पे rely नहीं कर रहा है. You are also being relied on by a third party. So you are following SAE 3400, but it does not relate to historical information. इसका example, किसी ने आपसे मांगा कि मुझे 5 years का projection दीजिए. Question in everybody's mind is whether as a chartered accountant I can approve or I can sign or attest what we call as prospective financial information. So please be clear, the clause 3 part 1 of the second schedule of the Chartered Accountants Act, clause 3 part 1 second schedule of our CA Act very clearly states that a member in practice will be deemed to be guilty of professional misconduct if he engages in estimation of earnings contingent upon future transactions in a manner which may lead to belief that he vouches for the accuracy of this forecast. यानी अगर आपका रिपोर्ट आप ऐसा देते हैं जिससे यूजर tends to believe that this is going to occur and that you are testifying for the accuracy or the happenstance of that future event, it is prohibited by the Chartered Accountants Act. But what the Chartered Accountants can do, and again now I would like to come back to the presentation because there we have covered the specific aspect of SAE 3400, and this question, friends, comes very regularly to us when we are dealing with UDIN, is that whether I can give a prospective financial information. So SAE 3400 mein, there is a format given, the illustration is given of how you can do it. पर क्या कर सकते हैं? You cannot say that this future event will happen. For example, there is a client of yours who has in the past 5 years grown at a CAGR of 8% annually. And he comes to you and says, अगले 5 साल का ये projection है. Please certify this projection. What you can as a chartered accountant do is you can prepare and verify the accuracy of these forecasts कि 8% अगर उसका था historical information, 8% use करके इसने जो calculation किया है और the working that has been done and the major assumptions that have been used at the forecast, those are not supposed to be verified, but you can very well verify the calculation of this, and that can be done through SAE 3400. A very common question people ask who are engaged in bank finance, कि बैंक हमसे मांग रही है future का projection. So if it is required, again for banks, I don't think it is required. We are the banking committee are trying to work with the IBA and RBI to have a list of all certificates, because sometimes some banks end up asking unreasonable certificates. But for certain engagements, if you are supposed to certify prospective financial information, it may be valuation or other purposes, then what I would require is that you please look at the SAE 3400 in detail and the illustration provided there under. So now with this, we have covered all assurance engagements. Historical, audit या review. अगर historical नहीं है और future से है तो SAE. Besides this, if you are not providing assurance service, but you are only providing related service, यानी सिर्फ management को आपको काम करके देना है, then there exists the SRS. And the biggest example of this is the SRS 4410 I will take first, which is the compilation engagement. ये क्या हो गया? अगर आपसे किसी ने unaudited financial statements for example मांगे हैं, बैंक बोलता है we will not wait till September, please issue a financial statement in compliance with schedule 3, then what you can do is as per SRS 4410 issue the report जहां clearly लिखा जाएगा कि मैंने audit नहीं किया है, review नहीं किया है, I have only prepared the financials to meet the objective of classifying that as per schedule 3, and it is a compilation engagement. So whenever somebody asks us for unaudited financials, please don't simply take printout of tally and put your sign and stamp. What you can do is issue a report under SRS 4410 for compilation and ensure that the client's objective is met. At the same time, we are in compliance with our standards. The second important standard under SRS is SRS 4400, which talks about agreed upon procedures. ये क्या हुए? काफी बार client will come to you and say, please verify A, B, C and D for me. It may be debtors, it may be inventory, some work that they want you to do for their internal purposes. These you are not reporting to a third party. For that also the SRS 4400 is an extraordinary piece of standard that the institute has come out with. You must please refer to the illustration that is given at the end. वहां पूरा illustration में example दिया गया है report कैसा होना चाहिए, what the management requested you to do, what audit procedures, what procedures, I will withdraw the word audit, what procedures you have performed, and how you have arrived at the decision that you have taken for the agreed upon procedures. That is covered by SRS 4400. So I think, friends, with this, we have tried to cover the entire ambit of the standards as such. One important piece that I would like to share with you before I can start taking certain questions on these standards, if you have any, and the other further discussion that the chairman wants us to do, is I would like to take you through an important guidance note that is issued by the institute. This guidance note is on reports and certificates. And what it talks about, friends, is that whenever you are giving a report or certificate, and iske piche 4 या 5 illustration hai, and it is important that we are discussing this under the BFSI committee because a lot of them actually deal with banking and the reporting to banks. What it what this guidance note, friends, deals with is the illustrative format for reports and certificates. मैंने स्क्रीनशॉट लिए हैं, ये इंस्टीट्यूट का ही मटेरियल है. The reason I'm putting it out there is काफी बार हम सब सर्टिफिकेट दे देते हैं, we create our own format, but actually the institute has this fantastic format. Whatever you feel is not important, you can amend, delete and change, but these 10 points that this illustration 1 covers can be used. And if you look at the title, वही लिखा गया है practitioners report for turnover, या for example आप किसी टेंडर के लिए टर्नओवर का सर्टिफिकेट दे रहे हैं. Net worth, so you may be giving a net worth certificate, for example, for a company for banking purpose, or even to an individual for visa applying purposes, working capital or any other engagement that is given for a tender requirement, then this illustration can be followed. But agar tender nahi hai, then also I would suggest that remove the tender clauses, but for normal certificates also we must use this format. The first point of this is, it talks about the report is issued or the certificate is issued in accordance with terms of our engagement letter dated dash. So again, I draw attention to the SA 210 which I discussed, engagement letter. इसीलिए बहुत critical है, आपको हमेशा आपके सर्टिफिकेट के स्टार्ट में, at the commencement of your certificate, you must refer to the engagement letter, because your responsibility and the management responsibility in detail is set out in that letter. The other aspects some of it may be covered in this report, but it is a very critical piece of document. The point 2 talks about what is supposed to be done. The point 3 and 4, friends, talk about the management's responsibility of the statement. So management ने ये बनाया है, preparation and maintenance of accounting records, for example, is the responsibility of management. The point 4, if you are, for example, giving a turnover certificate to your client who is in turn submitting it for a tender, then what you give is the management is responsible for ensuring that the company complies with the requirements of a tender. यानी मैंने बाकी सारे एलिजिबिलिटी क्राइटेरिया वेरीफाई नहीं किए हैं, that management has to certify and that is to be put up here. Then comes the practitioner's responsibility, यानी चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट इन प्रैक्टिस की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी क्या है, that is given here. For example, if you look at the first point, it says the amounts in statement of annual turnover for the year ended dash have been accurately extracted from the audited financial statements. काफी बार हमारे पास audited financial statements आती है और हम डायरेक्टली उसका रिपोर्ट दे देते हैं. So that report, we must mention that we have taken the annual turnover from this report dated so and so. If you go down, the 6th number point, for example, gives you this example that audit opinion, if it is issued by you, then you say our report. अगर किसी अदर ऑडिटर का बैलेंस शीट है और आप सिर्फ उसका टर्नओवर सर्टिफाई कर रहे हैं या नेटवर्थ वर्कआउट कर रहे हैं, then in point 6 you must mention that you have derived this number from the unmodified audit report dated dash of so and so. The point 7, friends, you must mention is that compliance with this guidance note and that you are complying with the guidance note. Point 8 is going to deal with the SQC. Like I mentioned at the beginning, SQC is the overarching umbrella, applies to all standards, and therefore you will state that you have complied with SQC 1 while issuing this report. The para 9 is your opinion. अभी आप इसमें para 9 में देखिए, for example, आपने जो भी किया है, you are mentioning I have accurately extracted from the audited financial statements ended dash dated dash. So this is where you give out what work you have done. And finally, very important is restriction on use, where you say that ये document certificate मैंने किस purpose के लिए दिया है. And why this becomes important, friends, is I always say this: if your client has come to you and asked you that I am going to give this certificate to apply a loan for, from example, X bank, you give him this certificate. Tomorrow he may go to Y bank and use your same certificate. The circumstances may have changed. And again, a professional opportunity for you should be there. Again, I'm talking in a lighter note, for you to give you another certificate. आप डॉक्टर के पास जाते हैं और बोलते हैं सर वो खांसी है, लास्ट विंटर में भी हुई थी, अगले विंटर में भी हुई थी, तो 5-7 साल की दवाई साथ में दे दो. कोई डॉक्टर हमें नहीं देता है. तो एज ऑडिटर्स ऑल्सो वी मस्ट नॉट गिव सच अ जनरल सर्टिफिकेट. प्लीज बी वेरी स्पेसिफिक दैट फॉर एग्जाम्पल यू आर गिविंग अ नेटवर्थ रिपोर्ट and you are giving it for visa purpose, mention that this is given for visa purpose. I would say one step further, if it is for US visa, please mention for US visa purpose. अगर वो 3 महीने बाद यूके जाता है तो यूके वीजा के लिए वो आपसे सर्टिफिकेट वापस लेगा. That is how the restriction of use must be very clearly laid out. And finally, the guidance note provides for signature and UDIN. So friends, this is a very important guidance note on certificates and reports, which is also issued by the institute. With this, I have tried to cover in the allotted time to me the standards on auditing, which apply for historical financial information, I have also tried to cover the reviews, that is the SREs. अगर historical information नहीं है, but third party use करने वाला है and assurance है, then we call them SAEs, that is assurance engagements. And if it is not assurance, something between you and the management, there are the SRS, that is the related services. This is the larger gambit under which these standards fall. For a deeper understanding, I would once again, as chairman of the Digital Learning Hub, request you that please visit the hub. Each of these standards can be understood in a far greater detail on that, and it will only help us to ensure that we do our audit in a far more better quality. We will all accept that somewhere audit standards don't get the deserved attention in our engagements, but in today's times, it is extremely critical that we give them the importance that they deserve. And therefore, we have tried under this committee to cover these, especially from a banking perspective, so that tomorrow if a bank asks you for a certain report, I can only share that under UDIN, we are receiving regular complaints that a bank has asked for. I'll give you an example where an auditor complained to us that the bank manager was asking him a certificate that the disbursement shall be utilized as per RBI guidelines. Now, how can you before disbursement certify that? But the bank manager insisted upon this. That complaint was raised with the UDIN and with the ICAI. Immediately, we took it up with the bank, and that person who was the bank manager had to come and say, sorry, that this is not an expectation, I withdraw it, and eventually he was sacked. Therefore, important that please don't come under the pressure. Somebody says, ये format है, हमें देना है, वैसा बिल्कुल नहीं है. Look at the standards on auditing, our guidance. You have to go and prescribe them. This is the format. For our lack of knowledge, we sometimes go and tell them, अरे कोई format हो तो भैया दे देना. Format उसे नहीं देना है. Format आपकी institute देती है और आपको उसे follow करना है. And if we follow that format, wherever it falls under the different buckets that I have explained, then we are able to conduct our assurance engagement in a far better form and also protect our interest to make sure that no over-reliance is made on the certificate that you are issuing. With these words, I thank Prakash ji for giving me this opportunity, the COE Jaipur, all the branch chairmen who are present in this wonderful meeting. And I hope, Prakash ji, I've been able to cover and give you an overview of these engagement standards in day-to-day practice.